In this video, I'll show you how you can use liquid tags in ProcessKit to have your form fields automatically pass their data around to other places throughout ProcessKit. So in this example, we're producing podcast episodes. So I'm going to go into my podcast episodes board. And first we'll run through an example to show you liquid tags in action, and then we'll unpack how all of this was set up under the hood. Let's start by creating a new podcast episode. And let's call it Episode Tim Cook. Okay, so our board has loaded in our podcast production process, and that takes us through everything from inviting the guest to recording and interviewing and doing the audio post-production and then setting up and publishing our podcast episode. Now in the Details tab, our board has been configured with all of these custom fields as well. So basically all of the things that we would need to put this episode together. Now what's going to happen is as we go through our task lists and fill out custom fields on those tasks, these custom fields in the project details are going to be automatically populated with those form values thanks to liquid tags. So let's start at the first step, and that is to invite the guest. And we can't check this off until we fill in our custom fields here. Let's do that now. Okay, so we've just filled in these 4 custom fields on the first task. And let's take a look at that Details tab. I'm actually going to open it up in a second tab so that we can keep referring back to it. And those fields have been automatically populated. Very cool. All right, let's move on. So we can check that one off now. Let's assume that the guest has booked their session. Okay, so now we're up to the third step in the process, which is to do some research on the guest. And we're going to pull this open, and here in the description, we've automatically pulled in the values or the guest's information, which we've filled into these fields up here. So using liquid tags, we've automatically copied that information here. Nice and easy for our team to follow. So now we're going to do some research, and we're going to drop in some notes. All right, so did a little bit of research and we've got some notes saved here. Let's take a look at our project details once again. And now those notes have been copied right into this field. Nice, let's move on. I'm gonna close all these steps now. All right, so we've finished that. We're gonna sort of skip ahead here. Okay, so now let's assume that we've gone through the recording session and we've done all these other steps. Now we're up to preparing the audio and dropping it into Dropbox. So at this step, our process is asking us to save that audio file in Dropbox and then put that URL here. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, and we'll check this off. Once again, let's refresh our details on the project. And now we have the audio file saved here. Going back to our task list. And now we're up to writing the show notes and the title. Let's save the episode title here, and then these are going to be our show notes. And we've got a little sub checklist here just to make sure that we've covered all of our bases. And now we can check that off. And let's refresh the project details once again. So now we've got our episode title and the episode show notes. Okay, so now once again, we're going to skip ahead, and now we're up to setting up and scheduling the episode for publishing. And here it's asking us to put in the episode permalink URL. So after we've set up our episode in WordPress or whatever we're using, we'll end up with a public URL for that episode. So let's drop that right in here, and we can check that off. And let's look at our project details one last time. We'll refresh, and there we go. So now this episode has all the pieces built into it, the guest name, their email, company, website, some notes, the audio file, the episode title, the episode show notes, and the final permalink. And so all of this was populated simply by going through our checklist and filling in the necessary fields. Okay, so now let's take a look under the hood to see how all of that was built out. First, I'm going to go to my processes. Now, I'm going to open this in another tab so that we can still refer back to the project. Now, in the first tab, I've got my processes. We're going to open up that podcast episode production process. Now, here in our podcast episode production process template, we're going to take a look at some of those steps. So that first step, inviting the guest, these were those form fields that we've filled in. Now, when we configure these, if we go into the block settings for these, for example, for guest name, it gives us this field here called reference this field. And then it provides this shortcode, which basically consists of step, because we're in a step in a process, and then the step ID that refers to this step ID, and then which attribute we're talking about. And in this case, we're talking about guest name. You'll notice that it replaces spaces with an underscore. And so this is the tag that we could use to output this field's value anywhere else. And we can simply copy that. And we have the same for the rest of these, like the company name and the email address and the website. Now, if you'll remember, if we go down to the third step in this process, we are researching the guest and the topic, and then we have the description. Here in the process template, you could see that we want to output those values from the first step. We want to output them here. And so I've copied them from here, and then I pasted those liquid tags right here in the description for researching the guest and topic. And that is how you can take the value from one field and output it in another place. And then once again, we have another field here, and this too would have its own referenceable liquid block that we could copy. Now, what about those project fields that show up in the details? Well, here's how those were set up. If we go into our podcast episodes board and we look at the fields, these are the fields that are automatically preloaded in our podcast episodes board, right? And I've edited these fields. If we go to boards and then go to fields, these are all of our fields that we have in our ProcessKit account. I have edited those so for example, guest name, I gave it a default value. And in that default value, I put in the liquid tag that references the field from our process template. So here you go. Here's that first step in our process template, and it's called guest name. And we go to block settings. We get that reference field, copy that, and we edit our project field template to use that as the default value. And I did the same thing on all the other fields that we're using in that board, like the guest email address and the audio file in Dropbox that takes that field. What else? Episode title gets that. So I've configured those fields here in my fields list. And then if I go back into boards, podcast episodes, and we look at this board's fields, that's the list of fields that are in there. And to show you what I mean here, let's just create one more episode as an example. And we'll go into its details. Again, when this is a fresh new project in our board, these have not been filled in yet. But as you can see, if we click on them, now we've entered editing mode and we can see what these liquid tags are. So in other words, these fields here are basically waiting for these values to exist. They don't exist yet, but once they do, once we start filling them in over in our tasks, then these are going to become populated. And these are here by default thanks to that pre-filled value on these field templates. Now, one more thing that I want to point out, this is a little bit technical, but you should understand how it works. You'll notice that now that we're in a project inside of a board, this now says task and an ID number and guest email address and task guest name, task guest company name. Before in our process template, these actually say step. So in your process templates, you have step templates. And this references this step. But once this whole process template becomes a list of tasks in a project, these liquid tags automatically convert to say task. And then they refer to specific tasks in this project's task list. So in this case, this guest name, if we look at the block settings, now that this is an actual task in a project, now this says task ID guest name instead of step, because the step is for the process template and the task is like an instance of that task. So that's how you can build liquid tags in your process templates, which will end up getting used many times across many different projects. And then once they get used in a single project, those become referenceable tasks. I know that gets a little bit confusing, but once you start to actually use these liquid tags, it starts to make a little bit more sense. Now, lastly, a few more things about liquid tags that you should know about. You can save liquid tags in all sorts of places, such as the description on tasks. If this task list had a description, you can save it in there. You could even use liquid tags in comments. Let's go back to this project's details, and let's add in a few more things here. Let's give it a start date and an end date. Now, I want to show you a few more of the things that you can reference using liquid tags. So in addition to getting fields from the tasks, you can also reference the project's title, like this, project.title. And you can see that's right there. And we can also do the project start date and end date, just like that. So project start, put that so we know what we're looking at. And then let's do the end date. We can do project.end. And there you go. The start date is that, and the end date is that, the date and time, and it'll use the current user's time zone. Now, if this project had a client associated with it, let's go ahead and associate a client. Let's go back to the details and output the client name. You would do client.name. And in this case, it's Burns Industries. Now let's look at Burns Industries, look at some of these custom client attributes that we had saved on this client. One of them is called location. So how would we reference this client's location? Well, let's do that now. Client's location is client.location, as you might have guessed. So basically, you want to take the name of the custom field and it would be client.attribute name. Now, if there were spaces, you would put underscores in place of the spaces. But in this case, it's just one word. And these are actually not case sensitive. I think the location field actually had a capital L, but here we did a lowercase l. It would work either way. And now we've output that. Now, there's a lot more that you can do with liquid tags, and we have it all documented in our knowledge base. Right here, we have the list of all the different liquid tags that you can use in different places, and we go through a few more details and some advanced use cases of liquid in ProcessKit. So that's how you can use liquid in ProcessKit to automatically pass form field data around to different places.